Good morning, WASBO world, facility directors, assistant directors, operating directors, maintenance staff, lead custodians, school business officials, maybe a district administrator or two. Welcome to Beyond the Pail, which is our facilities and maintenance webinar series. It is Thursday, November 14th. It's 9 days until the deer season when you lose most of your staff. So be aware of that. It's certainly winter weather season, or it will be if it hasn't reached your area of the state. We are joined this morning by our usual super talented co-hosts for Beyond the Pale. They're the good-looking guys. Here we go. Joe Ledvina is the director of facilities for the Crosse School District and a very busy guy, post-referendum world. And Jeremiah Johnson at Muskego-Norway, and he is the chief operating officer and a member of the WASBO board of directors. So good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. All right, well, we'll kick it off today. Our topic is snow removal, and being ready for all things winter ready. So we prepared kind of an A to Z to think about the whole winter weather conundrum. And I've always heard in Wisconsin, there's like 4 seasons, like winter, 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 and road construction. So we're heading into that winter season here. Joe is joining us from Lexington, Kentucky today.
Yeah, it's raining in Lexington, so hopefully the weather's better in Wisconsin.
Raining as well.
Yeah.
So I thought coming off the Facility Masters Conference, we had a theme of fun stories. So as we prepared this today, we talked about some fun stories that have happened in our own district. So Joe, when it comes to snow removal, any fun stories to share with the group here today?
Well, I don't want to throw my guys under the bus, but when they're out doing snow removal, in the middle of the night, and you get a phone call that they are hung up on a snowbank and they need help getting out, is probably the most embarrassing one for them. But you've probably seen something similar. We've lost a few flagpoles over the years where they've come in and apologized and totally understand. You're in the middle of a snowstorm, you can't see everything, and it happens quickly. But thankfully, no major injuries, just some tough situations.
Yeah. One of the stories that come to mind for me, I was working at a middle school and we had, I think, 18 inches of snow. I was the only person that was able to get into the school. So all morning I was trying to compete with the 18 inches. And I went in for lunch break and I pulled up to the garage door. And instead of putting the truck into park, I kept it in drive and I drove right through the garage door. So it just exasperated snow and a garage door. So no one was injured, but I still have a bruised ego from that.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Joining us today, we have Allison from SaltWise. So she's going to share some salt information with us as we get onto that portion of our conversation this morning. We do have a chat link. So if you're joining us today and you have questions, please put your questions in the chat area. And if you are a pro facilities person, please feel free to answer those questions as Joe and I work our way through the conversation this morning. So first question that comes to mind when we're thinking about how we attack snow and ice during the winter months, everybody skins a cat a little bit differently. Joe, in La Crosse, how are you guys handling your contracted services? Do you do things in-house? What kind of fleet are you managing as part of that?
Yeah, so we do it both ways. So we have a contract with a local contractor who comes out and does, I would say, about 55% of our lots and our snow removal. And the reason we do that primarily is they have the bigger, heavier equipment. You talked about the 18 inches snow. We have equipment that we can do most of the plowing in the lots. We can stay ahead of that. We can do sidewalks. But there's times, as you well know, that we just can't keep up. And so by having it both ways, a contract there, we can utilize them for other areas as well. So we would do it both ways. And really, it's a wonderful relationship. We have guys calling each other. We're talking to them. Our grounds crews are working with them. So it's worked out really well for us.
Nice.
And I think the biggest thing there is sitting down, when I think of contracting that out, sitting down with the contractor before the snow even comes, before with our guys, and just sitting down and kind of talking through the process of how we're going to, when we need extra help, when we need those things, how we do that.
We have a bit of a hybrid approach here where, like you, we'll have a plow company that does all of our lots, and then our grounds and school staff do the sidewalks. When we bid out these things, it's a little bit of a challenge. So we used to be in a relationship with a contractor where it was salt by the ton and hourly snow removal. And so one thing that kind of bothered me is I'd pull up, say at 3:30 in the morning, and there'd be two plow trucks parked parallel talking to each other about the Monday night football game, and we were getting charged for that. So we switched our RFP to say we want a per site, per snow removal, and per salting. So
Okay.
essentially, it could be $1,000 to salt this site, $3,000 to remove up to 4 inches of snow, and then after 4 inches, it becomes hourly because it's a little bit more of a tough job to remove. So we found more luck under that per site, and then we can track it a little better. We know we had a snow, we know we called for salt. The one thing I found is some contractors don't want to live in that box, and or the school schedule. So they like to remove snow on their own schedule. So we've invited
Yeah.
people to bid, and they're not even interested because they don't want to have to be done by 6 a.m. Have you found anything like that?
Yeah, really. A few years ago, we kind of changed companies who we're using. And that's a really good point, because the contractor we were using also had the contract for Gunderson Lutheran Medical Center. Well, they saw them as a priority, right? They're open 24/7. They're open all the time. They have people coming in through in medical emergencies. And so even though they tried to make us a priority, they weren't really meeting our needs. And so when you look for somebody, one of the things I was going to bring up is just make sure that you're the top priority. If they get too many contracts out there, then they can't do what we need them to do. So as you well know, we might have a late start. We're doing more of those than canceling school these days. We might need them in the middle of the day or the end of the school day once we've gotten there. So it's really important to kind of work those details out with somebody and make sure that they're not spread too thin, because it's happened to us and it's a tough situation to be in.
Agreed.
Hey,
One,
jump
go
in,
ahead, Mike.
Jim. I think it's often useful to have a similar conversation with your municipality, your streets department or park and rec, whatever it might be called, to find out where your schools are on their priority list. One example would be the Pewaukee School District campus, which is up on a hill. And if that hill isn't, and that's a municipal street, and if that's not taken care of early, it won't matter how well your own contractor did on the parking lot. The cars have got to get there in the first place.
Yeah, agreed.
Mike,
We're part. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, Mike, that's a good point, because one of the things that we have is our buses are just coming up to the sidewalks, right? So that's in a lot of cases, the snow plows have come through, and now we have those snow banks along the sidewalks. And so we have a pretty good relationship with the city. They know where those are happening, and so they're coming through and removing that snow sooner than later so that we can still utilize those spots. I'm sorry, Jeremiah.
Oh, all good. One other thing came to mind is we're thinking about contract and the contract language. So I think over billions of dollars in referendums have been passed this year. Some of those might involve a school closure. So you're going to close a school and open one, and there might be a whole new site plan. So I ran into an issue where we built a new middle school, but when we engaged in a 3-year contract, that wasn't even in the picture. So I rebid the contract because the whole scope changed. We took 2 schools off. We built a brand new school, and the contractor that had the 3-year agreement didn't win the new bid. And I thought he walked away gracefully, but he actually sued us, and we ended up on the hook for about half of a year's worth of contract because of a breach of contract. So just being careful when you set out your terms with whoever your contractor is.
Good point.
Yeah, that's really a good point. Not only with snow plowing, but other areas, right? As you do these contracts and there's some potential. We've run into that not with snow plowing, but with maintenance contracts as it relates to HVAC and some things.
So let's think about what we're sharing with our staff being the whole district, like how are we preparing them for the incoming weather? And I think about staff that like to arrive at 4:45 a.m. when you're in the middle of plow operations, or the staff that love to wear high heels during a 3-inch snowstorm. How are you messaging to your staff, Joe, when to get them ready for the snow season?
Yeah, typically we put something out in our newsletter. We do a newsletter once a month, or we'll put something special out, our safety person will, and just, um, walk like a penguin, that type of information out there. So to remind people, dress appropriately, wear the proper shoes when it's slippery outside, and take your time. So we try to communicate through newsletters, and then putting stuff out there as it comes up before the season starts.
Good. We send out a district-wide newsletter, and this usually early October is when we start to think about the snow season. For those of us that are around southeast Wisconsin, we've had 2 major snowstorms 2 years in a row, right on Halloween, actually, during trick-or-treating.
Great.
So we send this out early to get in people's heads about the processes. Some things that we note is that snow removal takes priority over cleaning. So we need to keep our entrances clear. So in case things aren't kept up in classrooms as much as usual, we don't have the staff to do everything all at once. So we put them on notice about that. Another thing is after school starts, and the students get into the building, we scrub all of our halls. And sometimes that can be a nuisance. So we just let people know that that's to keep the halls dry. And usually you'll want to close your door while we're scrubbing halls.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I have to tell you that we really haven't gone out there and told them. We've made the assumption. I can't remember when I've gone out there and told them that cleaning is not the priority. We're like you. We only have so much staff, right? But shoveling snow and preparing safety for that is a priority. And so that's a good point of reminding staff that the rooms may not be as clean, but we're looking safety first, and dealing with that. So that's a great idea that I think we'll share as well.
Right.
So an awesome resource here that some of us may not be aware of is the National Weather Service. They actually sent a message this morning to start to prepare for winter weather, but you can subscribe to be on this list for winter weather notifications. They're incredibly accurate as far as meteorologists can be accurate, but they will send out notifications almost hourly about incoming weather. And then they host several webinars that'll kind of give the percentage risk of the snowfall in your areas. And so we use this. All of our head custodians have access to join this webinar or have access to their notifications. And then they usually do a really good, like when you're having a major snowstorm event, they'll do like a 3 a.m. Webinar where hundreds of people around the state are on the call around your region to be on that. The one thing I will note is this one is for West Wisconsin, Southeast Wisconsin. So this might not be relevant to folks up north or in La Crosse by you, Joe, but I'm sure you guys have groups like this too.
Yeah, we do. We have the National Weather Service as a station right up on the bluff there. And so we monitor them very closely. So we're up to date on those things. We haven't typically gotten that information out to our custodians, but we monitor it very closely in the superintendent's office, in our office, and our grounds crew. We're always looking at that and listening, watching those reports.
All right, talk a little bit about salt. Yeah.
Quick, I was just gonna say that I know there's like another National Weather Service reporter or meteorologist who'll give a report in the Green Bay area, and they're supposed to cover also central Wisconsin. And I was doing an event in Wisconsin Rapids, Stevens Point, like lots of those folks were there. So the municipalities were asking if that report could cover a little bit more of the western part of that region. So I think wherever you are in the state, it's just figuring out who that person is to get that on that list.
Mm-hmm.
And this is Allison, who's joining us today. So she actually enters in the conversation right at the right time. So we're talking a little bit about salt now and all things salt. So I had lunch with a colleague yesterday, and he was sharing some of the things that you talk about that are pretty intriguing about over-salting or the types of salt. So would you take just a few minutes, talk about where you're from, what you do, and how you can help us all?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah. So I right now I'm located in Madison. I did grow up in northwestern Wisconsin in Bloomer, and I want to share just one quick story about like a crazy maintenance story. When I graduated from college, I went up to northern Minnesota. On the North Shore of Lake Superior, and I worked at an environmental ed center, and we were up on top of a hill, and we had one week where nobody could get up the hill. So we had students up there, we couldn't get our, any of the staff to come up to clean. So all of the instructors were up there, we were shoveling, we were making breakfast, we were kind of doing everything that needed to get done. And yeah, but I kind of like that kind of all hands on deck. Here we go. This is what we got to do in these situations. So morale was still pretty high. But I don't know if anyone ran into a garage. It might have happened.
Don't know, now you know.
And you people who don't know, yeah, kind of how to run all the equipment. So anyway, yeah, so I work around the state on the problem of salt pollution in our lakes, streams, and drinking water. So obviously winter road salt is the #1 source of salt that's showing up in our waters today. We also know that water softener salt contributes to this, as does salts from food production. So think about all the amazing cheese we make in Wisconsin, right? But that salt brine goes downstream. So we're definitely seeing this as a problem in not just the most urban parts of the state, but even I was in Calumet County a couple weeks ago with the county highway department there, and learned from the city that the city of Chilton has taken 2 wells offline in the last 20 years because they've gotten too salty, the municipal wells, too salty for people to drink. So I was talking to Joe before we went live. La Crosse County put out a report a couple years ago now, maybe just like a year, I think it was last winter, saying we're on a really unsustainable trajectory. Like our waterways are 35% more salty than they were about 30, 40 years ago. Like we can't keep doing this. Like we're not going to be able to drink our water. We're not going to have things living in that water. So I really work, as I've kind of mentioned, with county staff, with municipal staff, but then it's also looking at contractors, school districts, kind of everybody who's doing winter maintenance that would be putting down, tons of salt, more than just, maybe the cups of salt people use at their home. So you guys are doing an awesome job looking, big picture at winter maintenance, because it's not just the salt itself, right? It's all those decisions, kind of pre-season decisions and preparations that you're doing that are setting you up for success to not oversalt. So, thinking about the contracts that you have, Jeremiah, you mentioned like if your contract is time and material, you're incentivizing contractor to waste some time on the job, right? Chatting with your buddy, but also put more material down, right? Because then they're going to get paid more for that. So really making sure that those contracts are not incentivizing oversalting, but instead that we're paying for a level of service. Because there's really a lot of good news out there with counties and municipalities dropping their salt use by 30, 40, sometimes even 50% without changing level of service. So it's like we've kind of swung that pendulum from, and I mean, I grew up in northern Wisconsin, so my hometown, still doesn't put salt on roads, like salt the entire road. It's hills and intersections with a winter sand mix. It's like it's winter in Wisconsin, you're going to drive more slowly, don't expect bare pavement, right? But we've kind of moved from that to like, I feel like really coddling people and having this expectation that we have bare pavement, it's a zero tolerance policy, which I'll come back to with liability. So salt has been leaned on so heavily, and we've been putting it down, not forever, but, in the last 40, 50 years, and it's showing up in our water. So trying to reset and think about, how do we keep people safe? But snow fighting should really be like 90% mechanical. We're moving the snow, right? Maybe like 10% chemical as needed. When you're building new schools, Jeremiah, like you guys mentioned, really looking at how are we going to do winter maintenance at this site? Like there are consultants now that do low salt design in terms of thinking about the building. Is it north facing? Is it south facing entrances? You know, what kind of trees do we have? Are we setting up a really complicated parking lot that's going to be hard to clear snow out of, and drive us towards putting more salt down? And then kind of once you're doing all that kind of prep stuff, you're getting the information that you need. It's taking a look at the equipment you have. 90% mechanical means we want to have some good plow blades out there, right? A lot of people moving away from a straight blade to sectional blades that can kind of adjust more to different contours in the pavement and get a better scrape. Looking at tools beyond just, you know, like the plow and rotary, you know, brush or brooms, kind of attachments, right, on tool cats that can get you down to bare pavement. And then when you do put salt down, like, do you actually know how much salt you're putting down? The counties that do our winter roads, you know, state highways, like the state requires that they calibrate every piece of equipment that's going to go out and put salt down. So they know how much salt they're putting down per lane mile. And it used to be, you know, roughly 300 pounds a lane mile. Now we're seeing counties move down to 200, 100, and even like 100 pounds a lane mile as they get better scrape, and they are utilizing brine. So we're seeing definitely that movement towards brine that a few years ago, the DOT said they hit their lowest salt use per lane mile in 30 years due to utilizing brine. So happy to talk kind of like more about brine, more. I mean, there's so much out there, and I don't know, kind of, I don't want to step on your toes,
Yeah.
kind of where you guys are headed here with this. But I would definitely say that calibration is really key, because otherwise you don't even know what you're doing. So you can't adjust, you know, how much salt is needed based on pavement temperature, weather conditions, if you don't know how much is coming out the back end.
Allison, can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
Dale Rhodes was in the chat, and he said that all of his custodians have taken the SaltWise class. Can you tell us a little bit about that SaltWise class and how people have access to that?
Yeah, so shout out to Dale. Thank you. Didn't recognize your name pop up there. Yeah, so the SaltWise class is, well, we have two. I have one based on roads, but for you guys, it would be the one based more on parking lots and sidewalks. And that is offered around the state every fall. I'm kind of coming to the end of my training season. I think I've got like one more this week, a couple more next week, and then one in December. But if there's more interest from folks on the, you know, on the school kind of custodial facilities maintenance side, I'm happy to kind of plan some more, often do some in like January, February as well. Those mostly are, in person, but I've also we have a whole bunch of webinars too, just 1 hour webinars.
Okay, thank you. One of the points I like that you brought up, a couple things actually, and Jeremiah, I'll ask you this, the design of a building and looking at south facing for those main entrances, I think is a really good point. I'll use it in my own life. My wife said we'll never have a north facing house again, just because of those reasons, one of those reasons. But also the use of brooms. Do you use brooms on your facilities? Do they have access to use a broom? Because it's a great way to get it down and use less salt.
Don't think we haven't yet. We just purchased a tractor that might have the ability to do the brooming. Like you, we are trying to pay attention. When we just reconstructed our high school, we started thinking too late about, well, where are we going to push all the snow to? So there's that. Plus, my grounds guys aren't happy. We got 2 new stairwells that are part of our site plan, and you just got to do a whole different level of manual work when you have stairwells to work around. So yeah, sounds interesting with the broom. We're usually just traditional pushing snow in different areas.
We utilize the brooms quite a bit, and that is helpful, especially on lighter snows. Obviously, it makes it tougher on the bigger snows, but you can blade and then come back and broom later. But we do utilize those. Yeah.
Great. Allison, can you settle a big debate that we've had in our district? How effective is pre-salting? So it's just common rock salt. We're anticipating a snowstorm, maybe 1 inch. So we're going to lay down a thick layer of salt and wait and see. What do you think? I would
really dissuade people from pre-salting with rock salt. The pre-treatment with liquid brine can be really effective and can drop total salt use. It's kind of like putting like a little bit of oil on your skillet, right? You're trying to prevent that bond from forming, which I know you're kind of trying to do as well with this granular material, but you just end up putting so much more salt down in that granular form ahead of time. So would steer people away from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we're on the topic of salt, we can maybe you can add to this conversation, Allison, and curious what you do, Joe. So on the screen is our salt log. We really found this necessary after we ran into a potential lawsuit situation where a student had slipped and had a substantial head injury, and immediately the parents and their legal team accused us of not salting. So thankfully we had camera footage to show them that we were doing it, but we thought it was good to take it to the next level. So this is something our guy Tim created, where whenever we have a snowstorm, each school has this in a shared workbook where you put the date, how much snow fell, was there ice, what was the high temperature and the low temperature, because sometimes there's a very fast freeze thaw pattern where like you could get black ice within seconds. Where was there snow removed? What type of salt did you use? Was it just our rock salt, or we also have an ice melter when it gets to those sub-zero temperatures? How many pounds, and the amount of time it took too. Oftentimes when our board is thinking about staffing, they're thinking we just clean. So how many hours are we dedicating a year towards snow removal efforts? This has helped us also budget for salt and know how much we should have on hand and how much time it's going to take to do these things. So Joe, are you using something like this?
Yeah, we're doing the exact same thing. We had a lawsuit several years ago. I lose track of time, probably 10, 15 years ago. We've been keeping track since then. One of the things that we do, we have a shared doc out there that for every school, we have identified the location of where we put down salt, because there's sometimes we'll do the playground more often than we'll do a parking lot, for instance. So we have a very similar log that we maintain, that we do every year, that's really critical. We have an operational expectations for the board. OE12 is what we call it here. And one of the things we talk about mitigation and those things, and this is one of the things that we include in our reports to the board, the amount of salting that we're doing to prevent kind of those things from happening.
Yeah, I would jump in here. Really love this. One key thing that I would add to it or change, high and low temperature, I'm assuming that's air temperature, and you really, really want that to be pavement temperature. You want to know what pavement temperature is, because pavement temperature alters salt's ability to, like, it changes the speed at which salt melts, and it also changes salt's melting capacity quite drastically. So at 30 degrees, 1 pound of salt can melt 46 pounds of ice. At 15 degrees, that same pound of salt can only melt, I want to say it's about 6 pounds of ice. So it's a huge factor there in terms of how much salt is needed at different pavement temperatures.
Yeah,
So
good point.
yeah. Yeah, and the other thing I would add there, I don't know if people on this call are aware, but I did work to lobby on your behalf the last couple years. The state of New Hampshire has a program where people can get certified in best practices for snow and ice control, and then they're protected against a lawsuit. So if they do things like measure pavement temperature, use calibrated equipment, apply industry accepted rates, document, like you're saying here, what they do, they're protected if there's a lawsuit, because guess what? Like, you've done your due diligence. You can't remove any chance someone's going to slip and fall, right? And people fall in the summer. So we got a bill introduced that would create that same program, replicate that here in Wisconsin. And I got registered as a lobbyist actually to work on this, and we got it through the Senate and the Assembly, passed through both. In the end, the governor did veto it, and I could talk for hours about that process and kind of why that ended up where it did. But I have come back to the governor's staff, trying to see what we can do this coming session. And right now we're looking at trying to get some dollars in the governor's budget to support best practices in snow and ice control. So no, if you've had a lawsuit, if this is on your mind and you want to be a part of kind of changing the law going forward, let me know.
Awesome.
Allison, there's a question in our chat. How does one measure pavement temp as opposed to air temp?
I've got it. Look at that.
If you went
Visually,
through the COVID pandemic, you likely had 10,000 of these sitting around because we used to measure our temperature.
Very good.
yep, you do. So the ones used to measure temperature are usually calibrated up higher. So you want to make sure you have one that's for measuring outdoor temperatures, not like also an HVAC, thermometer is going to be much higher as well. But those sensors work. I mean, some equipment, it actually has it in the cab, or you can get like an aftermarket add-on so that you have that information as you drive down the road. So on the municipal county side, the operators have that right there, that information continuous all the time. But, a little gun like that, I don't know, Jeremiah, how much does that cost you?
50 twiddles. No, I'm not sure. Probably $25. I think this was a better one, like a name brand one.
Yeah.
Hey,
All
Jeremiah,
right.
and maybe Allison can speak to this too. Jeremiah, where do you buy your salt? So when you do salt, do you use local municipality? What do you do there?
For bag salts, we actually do bid out around the area. There's multiple people that will sell bag salt. And then for our stuff that we spread in our pickups, we usually share with the city. So they've been really generous at times, not even billing us, which I shouldn't say out loud. But our guys will go over there, get a dump truck filled up and bring it back. And then we'll get a bill, usually quarterly, for what they think we've consumed. So how about you?
Yeah, same thing. We work well with our city, and so all of our salt and sand mix is and our fuel is actually purchased through the city. So we work with them, and it's a great place to start. There was some concern that they were going to stop that process last year, and so they ended up not doing that. I complained enough to get that continued, but it's hard to find somebody who sells salt who has enough storage for what we really need. And so the municipalities, the counties, everybody, they're really the ones that we need to work with if we can.
Really nice segue into our next conversation. So thinking through an actual cancellation, I'm sure some of us maybe have more than others. We probably have one or two a year, but it seems as of late, it's been more about frigid weather than it has been about snowfall. When we have significant snowfall anticipation, I talked earlier about that webinar that's at 3 a.m. Usually we'll tune into that, and the superintendent will be as well. Following that, the superintendent usually hops on a call, at least here in Waukesha County, with all the other superintendents, and they have a little bit of a pact where if they're going to cancel school, they try to go together, which sometimes gets interesting because the southern part of the county and the northern might be significantly different in the weather that's happening. From there, usually me and our head of grounds will be on just driving the city, measuring snowfall, and feeding the superintendent as much information as possible to let them know, hey, we got trucks that are out on the streets right now. Streets are passable or unpassable. Ice is forming. It's usually a good read at like 5:45 a.m. if you're seeing cars and ditches to be letting the soup know. We try to have a practice of canceling prior to 5:30 a.m. But as we all know, it gets tricky when you get a snowfall that starts at 4:45 and just keeps building and you don't really know what you're in for. What's your process, Joe, and how do you help your superintendents make the call?
Yeah, very, very similar, right? And so our superintendent communicates with other superintendents in the area. They try to have that same pact. We've noticed that last several years that's kind of changed a little bit because of the proximity and the type of districts we have. We have some rural districts, that are a little bit different than ours, and we actually go out rurally too. I will tell you the biggest decision maker when it comes to snow is probably our busing company. And so our superintendent's out early in the morning driving bus routes along with our gentleman who's in charge of busing from the district, Jeff Elson. So they're out early and they're driving routes and then they're communicating very closely. I'm communicating with our custodians to make sure that we're in pretty good shape at the schools to have school and our parking lots and things are ready. So kind of a three-pronged approach or four-pronged approach. Other superintendents, the busing, us are involved in all that.
Mike?
Yeah, I just want to add that I'm sure you know this, that the late start approach can be helpful. especially in the rural areas. On the other hand, the early release for
Mhm.
during the school day storm event has become almost extinct. And it should be. It's not like it used to be. There are not necessarily parents at home. Um, Early release is very tricky, very problematic, and takes a ton of coordination. And that's why you just don't see it that much anymore.
That's a good point. Actually, in lacrosse, we didn't even utilize the late start, but we've started to with the newer superintendent. We started to do that, and so we're doing that. But we very rarely, or we try to avoid it at all costs, just for what you said, Mike, because there's not parents at home, and so
There's
we're sending
always
kids
somebody.
out into a snowstorm, and they can't even get into their houses in some cases. And so
Yeah,
really becomes kind of a liability issue.
yeah. There's always somebody who doesn't get the message, and that's the problem.
It works
Thing
on
that
that. I'm sorry, Jeremiah.
No. I was going to point out something you shared yesterday. One thing we've found helpful is to have a call chain, so each cabinet member has the people to call to let them know school is going to be canceled. Like we have a open weight room in the morning to the community, so I would contact the weight room supervisor, and other custodians, and there's a food service chain and such. But Joe, you mentioned like, what if you cancel school and kids show up anyways? Like, how do you plan for that?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. We know every time we cancel school, there's kids who show up at the school. And so we make sure that the front entrances are open. We don't lock all the doors. We keep the front entrance open. The custodians are the only ones who report to school in the city of La Crosse. So everybody else stays home, but we come to work so we can prepare for the next day. And so our building engineers know that we are going to have someone close to that front entrance. We bring all of our employees in, even the second shift ones, to help prepare for the next day. And so we make sure the front door is open. Someone's working near that front entrance so that we can address that if students show up. And it's happened before. And it's a very scary thought when kids show up and it's 40 below outside and they don't have a place to go.
That's a really good kid-friendly practice. Glad you guys are doing that.
Yeah, and just from experience, we know that it happens. It happens every time school's canceled, somebody shows up.
Yeah, it's
That was
somebody.
me once. I was a teacher in Toma, Wisconsin, and I walked to work. And I walked to work one day to learn that it's too cold, school's canceled.
Eesh.
Yeah.
You brave the weather.
Yeah,
That
I
was
ended up
good.
with frostbite on my nose the next day, but we made it.
Well, Allison, your Bloomer and Toma stories give you, some extra credibility here. If you were joining us from Fort Lauderdale, I just don't think you'd have the same cred
Yeah.
here. So
You
you
know, the city of Atlanta won the APWA Excellence in Snow and Ice Control Award last year, and I'm still poking the bear on that one. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't think that's okay.
No,
not fair, not fair.
The last piece on the last one, really Mike started the conversation early on about the relationship with your municipality. So in our school district, we actually have two municipalities. One of them is like top notch, and they're on their thing 5 a.m. exactly. They're on the road, so we know what to expect. The other one, we wonder if anybody's even home sometimes. So I'll call the police department and I'll get a voicemail that the police department doesn't open until 8 a.m. Just trying to figure out where their DPW is. And so our grounds crew has been bailing out buses on occasion that get stuck down in this little municipality because maybe their snow removal person called in sick or something. So having a solid relationship with your municipality is a good idea.
yeah, one of the things
Correct.
our municipality, La Crosse, what they do is if there's less than 2 inches, they don't usually get out. If it's expected, now they're waiting and they're not getting out immediately. And so that's affected us too. So having that good relationship, and so when they do come out, the schools are the top priority for us. And so having that relationship is important.
Joe, there was some turnover, I know, in the city of La Crosse, and the new I think street superintendent came to the La Crosse County event that we had, and it sounds
Yeah.
like they're implementing some new changes. He just started last winter, but I
Yeah,
think he's
yes.
a good egg.
Yeah, it does. Personnel matters, right? And so
Mhm.
One of the things when the city wanted to make some changes, we've sat down with them and we had some newer employees that were down there and they understood kind of the challenges between both of us. And so we worked out some really good deals in that. And so give you an example. One of the things that they know that they're going to have some infrastructure issues as it relates to snow and ice and as it relates to fuel purchases. And so we worked out we'll pay a little bit more than their cost to help offset some of those costs when they come, because it is expensive to store ice or ice, salt and sand mixtures and all those things. And so when you have to replace that storage unit area, we should pay a part of that. And so we sat down, worked that out, and now we continue to purchase salt through them.
Jumping forward, this is almost like a double-edged sword on the plow edge. So both preparing your equipment and getting it ready for the season. I'm sure all of our schools have a lot of snow blowers, plow blades, plow trucks, dump trucks. All of these things seem to erode at a very fast pace because of the nature of what they're being used for. Just as far as caring for your equipment, Joe, do you guys have a program like when you put stuff away, what are you doing when you put it away? And when you're taking it out, is there a process for ensuring everything's working?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we have a program, but we have a process. And so our grounds crew does a really nice job. So starting in October, we start preparing for everything, getting everything ready, working with the individual schools, making sure their tractors are all set up. Now, when we stop mowing, their tractors are set up, so they're ready to go at each individual site. So they have a process where they work through each individual school. We have 17 facilities. And so they're working through that process to get those ready. And then they start preparing their equipment. We also clean the equipment really well when we're done in the spring and store it correctly, so we don't leave it out in the environment, and so it lasts longer. So they're doing those individual things, but I wouldn't say we have a program with that. What are you guys doing?
Sounds similar. Just making sure everything is PM'd when we put it away. And then as we're approaching this time, our grounds department will usually go site to site and just make sure everybody's equipment's running, up and running. Last year we ran into a problem where we had a box where we kept all the salt inside the box. Well, the box had rotted out, and so we had to make some quick decisions on the fly when we had our first snowstorm. So also I see one of our trucks right now is plugged in, so I'm thinking the battery might be dead on it. So just making sure things that haven't been driven in a while are ready to go.
How do you get a gasoline to your sites for your snow equipment and making sure that they have everything's gassed up and everything ready to go? Do you have a process for that?
Yeah, great question. We have an account at our local gas station called Johnny's. So all of our head custodians have an account number that they go and they can fill up their gas cans to store them on site. Our grounds department has a large gas reservoir that they truck over there and then truck it back, so that can be on site. So really it's done just through our local gas station.
Okay, good.
How about you?
Yeah, we use the city site. So our grounds crew delivers the gasoline. They make sure everything's filled up, and they do that periodically. And so they know that everything's gassed up, ready to go. But our grounds crew does that through the municipal site.
Nice.
And probably not the most efficient way, as I hear you talk. So maybe we'll look at that.
Okay. As far as Allison had mentioned, plow blades, and as I think about damage, so we last year opened up a couple of brand new parking lots and maybe didn't have them marked properly, which is on us. But as soon as the snow melted, we seen curbs that looked a lot like the one on the picture on the right, where snow is pushed. When it gets so deep, it's really hard to identify the difference between the curb and the roadway. So if you got like a rookie driver from your contractor, they're just playing like bumper bowling with your curbs. How do you get prepared to make sure that damages don't occur in your lots?
Well, we do the best we can, but we're out there now. Everything's marked right now for snow. So we put out the rods. So they're identifying those areas where we know what we've had issues, and then all the other areas that they can to kind of help eliminate that. As you well know, that it doesn't always work. So when the snow's flying and you're backing up and you're moving forward, you don't always see that. But They've have everything marked now, ready to go for the snow season. How about you?
We are trying to hold until we know we're gonna get snow to put the markers in for a reason that we might not be thinking, but our
Yeah.
elementary kids love to grab them and like chase kids around with them, so they tend to disappear before the snowstorm, so
Okay,
we're holding out, but yeah, we're gonna try to mark and then really good this year. And then secondly, a preseason drive around with our plow company just to let them know, please stack the snow here and things that we're looking for curbs. And then also we got a lot of areas where the snowbanks can stack up like mountains where you can't even see the school behind it. So
Yeah.
then we have to truck stuff off. So what is that threshold where we're gonna ask them like, hey, we can't get any higher here, so truck it off. So that's kind
Yeah.
of been our process.
yeah, we do that too. And so we have a map of a site map of everywhere that's identified who's doing the snow plowing here, what the building engineer's doing, what the contractor's doing, what we're doing as a city, and then identifying where those snow piles are going to be. But good point. Then we work with our contractor because we don't have a big enough equipment, and when we have to remove snow, where that will be. That's another area of working with the city, because we don't have a lot of places where we can dump snow. And so if you have that good relationship, they may have some areas that you can dump snow when you do have to remove it from site. We do it as a last resort, as you will know, because it's extremely expensive to do. That isn't what we want to spend our money on, but
Yeah.
it's necessary.
And I would jump in there too. It's like we think snow, is water, but there's
Yeah.
salt mixed in there,
Right.
debris, trash,
Right.
right? So really best practices is to push that somewhere where you can recover that trash in the spring.
Yeah.
We don't want to just dump the snow into the lake or the marsh, right? Because then
Right.
all that trash and salt is going there too.
Yeah.
And I would just also say, like obviously the damage from that plow, really evident there in the curb, but salt also, right, does a lot of damage. So the studies are saying for every dollar we spend on salt, we're doing about $10 of damage to our infrastructure. It's just, you don't pay for it up front, right? But the concrete, the doorways, the flooring, all of that.
Wow.
Yeah, just avoiding salt too, where any of you have any new concrete, right, in the last
Mhm.
6 months. You want to avoid putting down salt in those areas as well.
We've been, usually when we get like a nice stretch of weather following a snowstorm, I've tried to be vigilant about sending emails out to the staff saying, please push all the snow away from the doors. Like it's just really disappointing to walk around and see all of your doorways, the bottoms like inch rusted, and it just seems to really eat away quickly.
Yeah.
We touched a little bit on where to pile snow. We can talk a little bit about black ice. So that's our friend that when everything looks normal and then you get out of your car and you take a spill really quickly. So Allison, any tips? Oh, I'm sorry, Mike, any tips on what we're seeing here?
Well, I'll just make a quick observation. And I'll turn it over to Allison. Just two things related to this. One is, during the winter season, lighting is incredibly important. Really good lighting means you don't need as much, maybe as much other things, right? So it's just not the time where you can afford to have a light that's out. And often they're on timers or sensors that aren't aligned to the natural light pattern. Or, we just changed clocks, what, a week ago, right? Often it takes school districts a while to catch up. So I just want to emphasize exterior lighting is incredibly important for winter safety. And the second quick point is you have to have winter rules for your playground supervisors. Winter rules are different than spring and fall, right? There are places where the kids should not be allowed to go. You can see in this beautiful picture, can't you just picture a bunch of third graders trying to climb up that thing and then go down face first? And there on the other side of that hill is a plaintiff's attorney, right, waiting with a negligence lawsuit for you. So often the playground supervisors will bunch up, they'll talk to each other, and they won't be paying attention. So there is such a thing as winter rules for playground. Encourage you to work with the instructional people and make that happen.
Yeah.
Okay, Allison.
So I guess the one thing that comes to mind, maybe Joe, because you'd mentioned this earlier, kind of thinking about winter sand. So when we do have temperatures get down below 15 degrees Fahrenheit, we really want to shift away from traditional rock salt. It's really, I kind of explained before, it loses its effectiveness in terms of melting speed and melting capacity as pavement temperature drops. And most, road agencies are going to move away from rock salt at that temperature. So Jeremiah, it sounds like you guys are using maybe Ice Slicer. There are a lot of different companies out there that are going to sell you something that will work at colder temperatures. But keep in mind, there is zero truth in labeling on our ice melters. So they can say whatever they want on that package. You really do want to look at the ingredients that are in there and the percentages of those active ingredients. So magnesium chloride and calcium chloride can work at lower temperatures than traditional sodium chloride will. Calcium chloride will work at the coldest temperatures, fairly effective down to actually -15. But, keep in mind, if you buy a product that's, like 0.01% calcium chloride, it's going to say calcium chloride on the front, might say it melts down to, they could say -50. It doesn't matter. So just kind of keep an eye on that. Those products can kind of jumpstart that melting, and sometimes that's all you need, like at those colder temperatures. But if you aren't going to kind of go that route, due to cost, due to the fact that calcium corrodes metal a lot faster than sodium chloride, you could look at winter sand. So just our sand with a little bit of salt mixed in, emphasis on a little. Anything over 5% salt needs to be treated like a bulk pile of road salt, according to the DOT. So a little bit of salt in there, to prevent the clumping and the freezing up of any moisture in the sand. But we don't want to shift to that like 50-50 mix, because then it's like you're going after the problem with the hammer and the screwdriver. It's like you don't know which tool you need. Are you melting the salt, or are you getting some traction with the sand?
And we'll use sand quite a bit. I know the custodians don't like it because you track it into the building. Yep. But we make sure that in the spring that we have to go through all of our parking lots and clean up our parking lots with the sand, which takes a little bit more time, but it is an effective way of preventing slips, trips, and falls.
Interesting one here. I never had this in the 11 years of my role until last year. I got a call from a meteorologist that we partner with, and he was calling. We already had snow on our roofs, just a general maybe 2 or 3 inches from a previous snowfall. It was calling for rain that night, which was going to freeze in the morning. And his prediction was that we were going to have a lot of roof failures because of the weight bearing on the roof, because now we have like a big icicle up there. So I did the best I could to just let our staff know, can you please make sure that your roof drains are cleared so they can drain properly? Joe, have you ever ran into this? And if so, what do? Do you start to get your shovel or your snowblower up on the roof, or what do you do?
No, but exactly like what you've done. We get up there, we contact our building engineers, have them make sure their roof drains are clear. We ask them to do that once a month anyways, but especially when we know that's going to happen, right? Because it's the worst fear. And then the other part of that is we have roof drains that have frozen. And so, especially those facing the north. We've had that situation that's created some flooding situations. Then we have to have someone come through, and what we've done is put heat tape in those areas over the years. We found out where those occur, but yeah, it's a real threat. And so it's a lot easier to get it before the rain comes, right? If you can kind of eliminate that issue, but it is something we monitor very closely when we have ice and then rain.
Right on. Allison, any final recommendations on how to salt a roof, or can you salt a roof?
I mean, I would, yeah. Personally, I've gone up mechanically, right? Like with those little giant shovel extenders, to pull the snow down. Wouldn't necessarily recommend the salting, like Joe said. I think a lot of people have seen the heat tape or coils up there.
Right.
All right. Well, we're winding down to our final 10 minutes, maybe even last 6 minutes. And so now you see a fresh green screen here. And we started thinking about how we're preparing for winter, but really we're preparing for every season ahead of time. So when we're thinking about our grounds care, we can't just let things go and have snow cover and then feel like when the snow melts, everything's going to be great again. So You're probably, hopefully already done draining any irrigation systems you have, because you don't want any freezes during that time. Might be a good time to fertilize and get things weatherized. Joe, anything you guys are doing right now to get your grounds ready, so when spring sports hit way too early, you're ready?
Yes, it seems to be winter's kind of moved back, right? And spring's such a small or short season for everyone. So then you have rain and everything combines games. One of the things, we're replacing sand in jump pits for track. We're doing all those things. We're looking at adding screenings now for all of our athletic fields if they're needed. We do all those things in the fall in preparation for spring, because you will know, as the track team wants to get out. In fact, they even want to take a snow blower over our track, right? And we have to stop them every year from doing that. And so they want to get out there as soon as they can, the softball, baseball team. So what we try to do is prepare everything that we can. Screenings added, sand pits. If you're not replacing sand, at least going through in there, and you'll have to do it again in the spring, but softening them all up. And so it's looking at all your athletic fields that you need in the spring and kind of prioritizing them, especially as the weather is nice now. You can get a lot of that done in preparation, because we know that March 31st, when their first game is scheduled, it's going to be snow on the ground or very wet.
Yeah. One conundrum we have right now, and it's a good problem, is some of our sports, our fall sports, are going into state playoff mode. So we're still operating our outbuildings, and one of our outbuildings we didn't have adequate heat in, and so we didn't have the water shut off to it late in the season, and we ended up having a pipe burst. So thinking about when you need to shut your outbuildings down if they're not properly heated, and in connection with that and all of our storm readiness, making sure you have a contract with a vendor, such as like a restoration contractor, to be on call, because inevitably we hear time and time again, pipes freezing and people having to call in a contractor to help them clean up the mess. So that's a topic all into itself, but I think a good practice for us all to have.
That's a good point. We at Central High School, we know that we have a storm drain that freezes, and then if we have a really heavy rain or a quick melt, it backs up at our front entrance. So just making sure that that area is cleaned out before you even get into the winter system is helpful. Prevents a big mess.
Put a little plug in for our consultants like Allison. Also, Mark McGinnis, who's really involved in WASBO. He can help your organization become weather ready certified. And that usually involves the work of multiple meteorologists coming into your school, looking at all things weather related. I was shocked when, it wasn't just like being ready for a lightning strike. It was like tornado shelters, where to put your snow, thinking about like this time of year. If you take a look at your parking lots and you see water running through the center of a parking lot, you can bet when you have ice problems, it's going to be in that same spot that you're observing now. So seeing where the water is running off. So please, as all of those that are on the call, utilize consultants and get all the help you can when it comes to this process. And just a quick wrap up. So we've been talking all morning about snow removal, being ready for ice and snow. This all starts late summer as you're starting to get ready and geared up for the season. Through the season, working with your custodial staff, your head custodians, to make sure that they're supported and have the things that they need, making sure that you have a great relationship with your municipality, and you're in a strong partnership with your superintendent if you have to call school off. Outside of that, Joe, anything that parting words for us?
No, I think you said it all. I just really didn't know anybody, Allison, I didn't know anybody could specialize in salt like you have. So we appreciate your expertise, and I'm just concerned about your personal life, that you've got so much salt information. You have time for
Yeah,
salt.
yeah. Me too here. No, yeah, I just put my email in there, wasolways@gmail.com. It's like a governmental kind of coalition that I work for. So I'm able to offer services for free. Take advantage of that. Happy to help out with communication resources. Like I said, we've got different webinars, like even like 5-minute, 10-minute videos that are prepped, that if you wanted to just have all your custodial staff get like a few little nuggets going into the season, happy to help out in any way. So thanks again, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Allison, thank you. I'm sure Toma's school district is sorry to have lost you as a teacher, but at least the districts across the state benefit from your expertise. Joe, Jeremiah, great job as always. I think it's my job to wrap us up and send us out. We've got less than a minute to do that. We are on again next time, January 9th, 2025. And look forward to seeing everybody then. Until then, have a great weekend starting tomorrow, and happy holiday season.
Thank you.